Well, in Paris, what we hope to achieve is a new legal agreement which sets out this vision of a carbon-free, greenhouse gas-free world, and also a much more practical action program that countries, cities, citizens, companies who want to do carbon neutrality, who want to decarbonize their emissions, can sign up, get information, get help, and showcase and share experiences together. So I hope that Paris will comprise 2 or 3 big picture elements, a big long-term vision, as well as a more practical way of how to get there.
Well, it's a vision that has to be expanded, because we're beginning to run up against a time deadline. The building sector and the built environment is really the largest consumer of energy and the producer of emissions in the world. We're going to be doing a tremendous amount of building over the next decade and a half, 2 decades. And so it's incumbent upon us to get the word out that we need to begin to design to carbon neutral and develop carbon neutral standards. And in fact, it's happening. It's happening in the US and it's happening in other countries all over the world. So it's something that's incumbent upon us to do at this time in history.
Suggesting that we look at negotiating a goal of net zero emissions or deep decarbonisation or carbon neutrality. More or less these terms mean the same thing, which is phasing out all greenhouse gas emissions possible to zero by around 2050, mid-century.
So we've set out a roadmap to 2050. We now know from the science that in order to have a better than 85% chance of staying under 2 degrees centigrade, that we need to phase out CO2 in the built environment by the year 2050. So we've set out a roadmap that begins with the signing of some kind of accord or agreement in Paris that begins and has emissions reduction targets for the built environment out to 2050 in 5-year increments. And the targets vary by country, so there's quite a bit of flexibility, so the developing countries can keep developing, but begin to level out their carbon emissions, whereas developed countries, which have quite a bit of renovation to do because their building stock is essentially set, can start reductions right away from the signing of an agreement. And so that by 2050, 2055, the entire built environment has phased out its CO2 emissions.